Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Weather Nerds. I'm First Alert Weather Nerd CD Finley here with fellow First Alert Weather Nerd, Sean Bellafiore. Sean, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Really appreciate it. And we got a little bit to talk about. There have been some interesting, to say the least, weather headlines over the past week. So let's go ahead and jump right back on into it. So the first thing that we're going to talk about, obviously, we're heading into March. We're getting closer to the middle of March now, and it's kind of that time of year where we start to warm up and we start to see maybe a few more storm systems rolling back through the area. And so I know a question that's been on a lot of people's minds, and maybe you've probably answered this already since we're already this far into the month, but many people have been wondering whether or not we're actually going to get cold again here. Because, I mean, typically between, the end of the actual official winter season and maybe about late March, early April, et cetera, we do maybe at least see, one more little itty bitty cold push before we get to that typical storm season. Right. So we're gonna do a little bit of theorizing here, but so let's go ahead and take a look. I'm gonna see if I can pull this up real quick. So this right here is basically the highs and the temperatures from the last 10 days. So you'll notice there, this past weekend, Saturday and Sunday, we hit 60s and eventually 50s, which is a little bit cooler this time of year, I believe, correct?
You think it is, and it is, but we're still supposed to be in the 60s as far as those afternoon average temperatures go. So, the 70s and the 80s, we were so warm before that honestly, I think if we didn't have those 70s and 80s, this cold snap could have been a little bit worse than it actually was. But yeah, no, it was. I love this past weekend. I mean, I'm a cool weather guy through and through. The summer is. I hate it. Yeah. it's hot and dry. And then you got to talk about it for hours on end every single day. But yeah, you kind of mentioned it. I think we're coming to that might be it. We're getting close.
I was going to say, there's just not especially when we're, we always talk about model data and stuff like that. That's what we use to, do all of our forecasting. There just hasn't been really any major hints as to any more, at least strong cold pushes, anything that we've experienced from, say February, January, nothing like that. But yeah, no, I agree. This is probably my favorite kind of weather. It's baseball weather. It's my favorite kind of time of year. So, 50s, 60s, that's kind of like the sweet spot, Yeah. But like you said, when we get to the dog days of summer, you're finding ways to hundreds of different ways to say, hey, it's hot again,
Exactly. And the fun part about this winter season, I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head, but I think this wintertime season did finish a little bit right around average as far as I think the average high temperature went, just because we had these such big temperature swings. But winter started almost exactly when it should. Our average first date of a freeze is November 10th, and we did that in 2024. That was first freeze. And then the average last date for a freeze is March 11th, and our last freeze was on March 10th. So we pretty much nailed it. We had 4 more freezing mornings than average. So, if you go back into the history books, all things considered, this is a mild, normal winter. And then you actually go back and dive through, and we had, record cold temperatures. We also had record high. I mean, winter has been kind of everything except for really wintry. We did have, those small winter weather events. So, better this year than a lot of years past.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, and even if you look back at the month of February, it technically speaking was a more normal February when you're looking at the averages, right? Yeah. But when you really dive into it, like you said, you see February is practically split down the middle. The first month or so, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, I believe the first month or so was a little bit colder than normal, and then
it's like the first week and a half was actually warmer, hot. Yeah, we had record temperatures. We got into the 90s in a couple of spots. Then the middle 2 weeks were frigid, super cold, and then the last couple of days, we had a couple of cool spots. But it's been a lot of warmth, and we've been seeing those extremes kind of go back and forth during the month of February. Which we kind of expect, right, when we're going into spring, and then everything kind of starts getting a little topsy-turvy. And, speaking of spring, we got those spring severe storms that are going to be pushing through. We had, the severe weather, the very quick chance this past weekend when that cold got here. We'll have another chance on Wednesday, today the 12th. And
at the time of this recording.
and we won't have another chance on Friday. Looks like all the severe storms are going to be out of our area, but potentially a major severe weather outbreak Friday, Saturday, Sunday for the eastern, half of the country. So we're getting into that spring severe weather season hot start, I think.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have a little bit more on that in a little bit, what we can expect here in Central Texas at least. But in terms of more severe weather headlines, as we're talking about it, there have been a few different things, not just here in Central Texas, but across the nation that we've been watching. But here in the state of Texas specifically, like you said, just this past weekend, we had that one quick little chance, mainly in our northwestern counties, up closer towards Hamilton and Clifton, that general area. Thankfully, that chance actually missed us just a little bit. It was actually further north and east than some weather models were actually picking up on. But that doesn't mean that other places didn't see that hail, and they most certainly did.
Yeah.
This is what we're about to look at here is the Facebook page of the U.S. National Weather Service in Fort Worth, and this is kind of the first post that they put out, kind of indicating like, hey, these areas could see maybe some isolated large hail. And again, this was from this past Saturday. This is not current. So let's go ahead and take a look at this here and just kind of see. Hey everybody, Future CD here. We ran into a few audio issues when we're talking about the websites, so you'll hear me butt in here with the voiceover every once in a while when we change to the web pages. But we're looking here at the U.S. National Weather Service in Fort Worth, Texas, their Facebook page. They were talking about that chance for isolated hail up to 2 inches in our northwestern counties on Saturday morning. And as you'll soon see here as we jump into the comments, there actually was a viewer who submitted some pictures of the hail out towards Wiley, Texas, which is closer towards the DFW area. And while these were on the smaller side, some other places did see larger hail, as you'll hear us talk about in just a moment. Places like Waxahachie definitely got slammed with some much larger hail sizes, as some other viewers submitted other pictures as well. So that's what we're looking at here on this Facebook page. To I think about 1.5 inches in diameter is what they measured, so they actually weren't that far off with their prediction of maybe 2-inch larger hail. So and again, that was a very isolated thing, not everybody saw that. But
and also there was one person either was injured or there may have been a fatality from what was probably a microburst.
Oh really?
So I know that there was a lot of wind speed issues with some of those storms. It was mostly hail is what we were seeing, but then sometimes the weight of the wind sometimes just crashes out, and then all of a sudden what was a hailstorm, then all of a sudden you get 60 plus mile per hour winds. So hey, get ready for more of those early wake up calls. I mean, nothing immediate that we're tracking, but we are getting to that time of the year, especially kind of the late March, April, early May. We get those overnight lines of storms that move through. So kind of an early hint at what could be coming in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, that was one of the many headlines that we've been tracking from this past week. Also in the state of Texas, Texas is a large state, right? We're always talking about how large Texas is, and people love to joke that the fact that we can have 4 seasons in one day. Yeah. And from this past Saturday, again, basically that same day, but later on in the afternoon and evening, we practically had that happen. Places like McAllen and down closer towards the Texas-Mexico border, they were down there in the 90s, so they were feeling more like summer-type weather. Meanwhile, areas closer to Houston were feeling a little bit more spring-like. They were 70s and 80s, but they also had severe weather going on. There were some severe thunderstorm warnings just to the north of the Houston area. And then meanwhile, here in Central Texas, we were quiet but chilly. Again, we were talking earlier about 50s and 60s. And then you go all the way up to the Texas Panhandle. They were feeling more winter-like. It was snowing and 30 out there in Amarillo, essentially. So talk about 4 seasons in one day. It's a pretty busy day of weather across the state of Texas this past Saturday. So let's go ahead and take a look here. And I know we may have been having some audio issues while we were looking at the website, so we'll kind of just dive through this pretty quickly. But you can see here, this was actually a post that was on the KWTX page, as well as some of our personal professional pages, but you can see this is a radar grab of from this past Saturday. So let's go ahead and take a look here. But again, you can see those severe thunderstorms that were down closer to the Houston area, and then as indicated by the purple highlight there, you see those severe thunderstorms that were down closer to the Houston area. Got everything going on. Indicated, and you can see, or it doesn't show it on the radar grab, but Amarillo and the Texas Panhandle specifically picked up about 1.5 inches to maybe even 3 inches of snowfall. So it wasn't just like a little bit of a flurry here or there actually was a little bit of accumulation that happened up in the Panhandle. So again, this past Saturday was pretty busy, and you can probably expect it to be more that way as we kind of continue this transition period between seasons. So that's pretty interesting to think about. Again, that's not really anything that's out of the ordinary. I mean, like we said, Texas is a huge state, so this happens a little bit more often than you might think. Mm-hmm. But so that's kind of what we got going in the way of local headlines. Nationally speaking, there were some other pretty interesting headlines that happened there as well. As some of you may have already seen, this is not one of our stations. This is actually a Fox station out in Orlando and I'm trying to remember what day this happened. This was either yesterday or the day before.
Might have been,
March
Sunday or Monday.
10th. So 10th,
so that was Monday.
Monday, yeah. So Monday morning, this Fox station in Orlando, they were covering some severe thunderstorms that morning. And lo and behold, one of them winds up with a tornado warning, and so of course they have to go live on air and start covering it. But the interesting thing about this particular coverage is that the tornado actually wound up hitting their station live while they were on air. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. This is always interesting to see, especially for us as meteorologists, seeing how other people, handle that kind of situation and things like that. So let's go ahead and take a look here at what went on at Fox 35 on Monday morning. That kind of. Hey everybody, Future CD here, part 2 Electric Boogaloo with all of the audio issues we've been running into. But again, we're taking a look at Fox 35 Orlando's website where they have that clip of the tornado actually impacting their station live on television. You can see their meteorologist there doing a little bit of coverage, and it looks like they have a few storm chasers out there as well on your right-hand side of that screen. But thankfully everybody was okay. Again, we mentioned that this tornado did actually impact their station directly. And here in a moment, you'll see them pull up the Skycam. There we go. You see it popping up there on your screen. That Skycam is actually looking at the tornado directly. You may not even realize it, but all of those rain bands are actually rotating, and the tornado is actually hidden within those rain bands. And as it gets a little bit closer to the Skycam that is located on the top of their new station, you can see the rain bands really start to rotate around, and in just a moment, you'll start to see some debris flying through the air as the tornado starts to cross the highway. And believe it or not, this tornado was actually rated a preliminary EF2 on the enhanced Vegeta scale. So this one did actually do a little bit of damage to their station, but again, as I mentioned, just about everybody was okay during this event. So thankfully, everyone was fine as they covered this tornado live. Guys, I know we were having some more audio issues there. For whatever reason, it was repeating my words underneath the new audio. So that's fun. We'll have to deal with that later on. But again, you can see what they had their Skycam pulled up there, right? And that Skycam was actually located at their station. So that wasn't like a remote thing. So you could see the tornado actually coming across the highway, and it may have been hard to see because it was rain wrapped essentially. So, but the way you could tell, I mean, as you all saw, you could all see the kind of debris flying across the screen and stuff like that. So definitely an interesting morning that they had out there at Fox 35 in Orlando on Monday morning. So that was one of the more viral, kind of headlines that we had in the weather headlines from this past week. Another thing that we actually have coming up, and that we have discussed actually on Degrees of Science, is the lunar eclipse that we have coming up on this upcoming Thursday evening. So at the time of this recording, it's tomorrow, but
it's technically Friday morning. It's like right after midnight. But for most of us, you go to bed Thursday night and you wake up Friday morning, you're gonna miss it if you don't wake up.
Yeah, exactly. I would say that peak totality time happens just a little bit after midnight. So if you want to see that blood red moon, that's probably going to be the best time to see it. But let's go ahead and take a look here. I actually have a clip from our Degrees of Science from this past week where we talked with Dr. Noah Petro, who was a scientist with NASA, and he talked a little bit about what this lunar eclipse actually is, what it means, what happens with it, and the best way to see it and all that kind of stuff. And so let's go ahead and take a look at this quick little 2-minute clip of our interview with Dr. Noah Petro. First and foremost, what exactly is it that causes a lunar eclipse?
Quite simply, a lunar eclipse is caused by the alignment of both the Earth and the Moon and the Sun. And so it takes all three of those things to come together. I'm going to use a little visual display. I've got a Moon here and an Earth here. And if you're the Sun, basically what has to happen is that the Moon passes behind the Earth. So the Earth is between the Moon and the Sun. And what happens during an eclipse is that the Moon dims. It goes into the shadow of the Earth, and so it dims. And during totality, the moon turns this beautiful bright red color. And what that's caused by is the basically the projection of every sunrise and sunset on the Earth going onto the surface of the moon. So during totality of the eclipse, you'll be treated to this beautiful red moon.
When it comes to these lunar eclipses, how often is it that they occur?
Well, they occur in clusters. So for instance, we haven't had a total lunar eclipse happen since 2022, and typically when they do occur, they happen in either twos or threes. And so this is, they occur, every few years. Now you have to be on the right hemisphere of the Earth. Imagine if I bring my example baseball back, moon passes behind the Earth. The people on the sun-facing side, where it's midday, aren't going to be able to see it. So we have an eclipse coming up, as you said, in March. The next one after that is going to happen in space at all is in September. But again, the other hemisphere of the Earth, we'll get to see that.
So can you explain what people will see during the different phases of this eclipse?
This unfolds very slowly. The moon slowly moves into the Earth shadow, and so it will go from being a beautiful, bright, full moon and slowly dim as it passes into the Earth shadow, and you'll start seeing sort of portions of the moon dim as it gets more and more into the Earth shadow. When it's completely enveloped in the Earth shadow, it goes into totality, and that lasts for about an hour or so before it starts coming out the other side. And so if it's cloudy at the beginning, it may clear up later on. You don't have to be in the right place at exactly the right time because it does unfold so slowly.
Okay, so that's our interview with Dr. Noah Petro. Again, that was on Degrees of Science. So, and one thing I do want to show you here, and I did bring out the headphones to make sure we have good audio. So hopefully this doesn't mess up for us. But let's go ahead and take a look at the Degrees of Science YouTube channel, which is where you can find all of these. But let's go ahead and take a look at the degrees. Oh, okay, sorry, it's repeating ourselves here for whatever reason.
Technology.
So we do have technology issues. That's fun. But basically what we're trying to get at here is you can go to the Degrees of Science YouTube channel and see what we have going on there, see all of the previous Degrees of Science interviews. Of course, our lunar eclipse interview is included on that. We also upload these recordings of the Weather Nerds podcast to Degrees of Science as well. So if you don't catch a live show, you can always go back to Degrees of Science and find our podcast playlist and replay these there. So quick little fun tip, and I'm going to be quiet here real quick and see if we can get this to pop up so I can show you guys at least one more time. So bear with us for just 1 second. One more time. So bear with us. Bear with. Okay, I think we got it. I may have to wait a second before we pull up another website because for whatever reason it keeps repeating my audio. I may have to wait a second before we pull up another
right now, right?
Well, now it is. So
I think
there we go. But you can all see it there, folks. We're all talking about that Degrees of Science YouTube channel. So I apologize for all of the audio issues that we keep continually running into, apparently. But we'll have that hopefully ironed out before we get to the next episode. But again, Degrees of Science, be sure to check that out. Of course, we got Lunar Eclipse coming up tomorrow night, mainly Friday morning, as Sean mentioned. So something to keep in mind. Yeah, with that said, that's pretty much all of our headlines that we had to cover today. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what we have coming up. So, Sean, I know you're getting ready to go on for the noon show here in just a few minutes. So why don't you run us down a little bit about what we got going on specifically this afternoon for your Wednesday?
Yeah, we're March 12th, just the internet, everything lives forever. Just want to make sure the date, March 12th, 2025.
Yes.
By the way, we do have a severe weather risk for parts of central Texas this afternoon. The weird part about it is it kind of reminds me a little bit more of like a mid to late spring severe weather setup where we have the dry line in place, and the dry line could kick off a stray storm or two in the afternoon. I think we're kind of seeing the impacts of what has been a mostly dry kind of wintertime period for us. And I mean, if you go back, I'm trying to do some quick math in my head. I think we're about 14 inches, 15 inches behind from the start of June last year up until today. And I think that's having a little bit of an impact. West Texas is also a little bit on the dry side too. So the more dry air that we get, the dry weather, lack of rainfall, that kind of can help to shove the dry line a little bit farther to the east. So I'm hoping that that's not going to be a case for the entire severe weather season where it's just, parked across central Texas. But pop-up storm chance possible this afternoon east of I-35, especially 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. Gusty winds and hail, the big severe weather threat. Yes. But it's also on the other side of the area, we also have a fire danger risk as well. Dry line, dry air, very hot temperatures, and with as dry as the ground has been, that is ripe for wildfire conditions. So Wednesday, the fire risk is west of I-35 primarily, and then Friday, Pi Day, March 14th, it is an area-wide grass fire risk, and it's on the high side. We're talking, the Texas A&M Forest Service, they put out these, maps of where the worst fire conditions will be, and most of central Texas is either under the very high, which is the second highest category, or the extreme fire danger risk. So, we're not saying that there's going to be big firestorms or anything, but any sort of spark that sparks a flame that will probably cause it to go, and wildfires can spread very, very easily with the conditions that we'll have in place. So just a couple things to watch out for.
It's going to be that kind of day where you want to be very, very cautious, especially if you're someone who does a lot of outdoor burning with like brush piles or anything like that. Mm-hmm. You are definitely going to want to be careful this upcoming Friday. And even today, I mean, you can see at the time of this recording, again, we're talking about March 12th, Wednesday. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's very interesting to see how that kind of always sets. I mean, it's pretty comparable to, it's hopefully not going to be nearly as bad as what we experienced from this past week with all the dust that we had in the air and how dry it was outside. But it's always interesting to see this kind of thing set up. On one side, you have, severe storms, and then on the backside of that front and the backside of that dry line, you always have just complete dry conditions. So I have a friend who works for the weather service out in Midland, and he jokingly texted me the other day. He was like, "You guys ready for me to send you some more dust?" And I was like, "Please don't."
Man, I'm still trying to wait to wash my car after that. This is a whole shade of West Texas from last week, and then it's like this week another potential dust incursion coming from West Texas. I'm like, at this point I might as well never wash the car. Exactly. But hopefully Mother Nature will help as long as it doesn't bring us hail. Good news too. Yeah. But you were talking about severe weather risks, the fire weather potential, and then one thing I'm sure we'll be talking more about, not only the upcoming severe weather chances as we continue to get deeper and deeper into spring, but we're hoping for rain too. Yeah. You mentioned at the top of the podcast that we're almost halfway through the month of March already, and if we get through the end of next week without rain, which is pretty good possibility for a lot of spots, we will potentially have missed over 15% of our seasonal rainfall totals. Mm-hmm. We get a little bit over 11 inches of rain in March, April, and May combined, and we're almost already 2 inches behind for the month of March. So rain, please, as much as we can get, but not flooding rain. Severe storms.
Most definitely. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. This will probably be about it for us on this episode number 3 of Weather Nerds. And again, hopefully, barring any audio technical issues, you will be able to catch this on the Degrees of Science YouTube channel as well as we kind of upload the recording. So again, thank you all so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And we will see you again next week.